Have you ever wondered what goes on inside of that big hairy head? Yeah, me too. I've wondered for years. But unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to know the answer. Well, not entirely. But thanks to a lot of research and studies that have been done over the years, we do have a much better understanding of what goes on in that head. And it's a little different than what most of the myths and old wives' tales would have you believe, because it has been commonly considered that horses don't even have a certain part of the brain that is necessary for certain types of thoughts and that sort of thing. And as a result, that they simply are not even capable of certain behaviors. Well, I don't believe that's true at all. And, well, actually, I'm quite sure it's not true, because I did some research on the subject a while back and concluded that the horses actually do definitely have that part of the brain. That's not a question. I have actually seen literal actual photographs of it, as well as animated pictorials and all sorts of things like that, describing the various parts of the brain anatomy in a horse. Now, while the brain anatomy of a horse is definitely not as big as that of a human. It's not. That's another one of those myths. A lot of people say, oh, it's the size of a walnut. No, it's not at all. It's about a third the size of a human brain. But considering that humans actually only use a third of their brain, or 30% of its capacity, or something like that, if a horse actually uses its whole brain, they're just as smart as we are. Now, one of the things that gets us confused is that they have a very different way of communicating. Their language is very different, and even their thought patterns. Most of your thoughts are in, well, probably whatever your native language is. So you think in sentences and that sort of thing. Horses don't think that way. They think in images, and they connect images to emotions and how a certain image makes them feel. Are they comfortable or uncomfortable? Does it hurt? Does it, whatever, that sort of thing. So their way of thinking is quite different than ours, because it doesn't matter where you put them in the world, they're thinking. It doesn't matter, because they're thinking in images, not in a language. So it doesn't matter whether they're English, Spanish, French, Chinese, or whatever. You can take them anywhere in the world, and they're going to be able to talk to other horses, because they don't use a verbal language like we do, and they don't think in that verbal language either. So it's a very different way that the brain functions. But it's actually capable of quite a bit, and the more I work with horses, the more I have come to believe that horses are actually pretty darn smart. But I'm not just, this video isn't just about talking about how the brain works, because I've actually done a video on that not long ago. But I want to do one, I want to talk about something that I haven't talked about in a number of years now, and that's, well, the horse's perception, how they perceive things, particularly how they perceive the world around them, how they see things, that sort of stuff. I had to take a little break, go get my lunge whip to keep horses away from the bag of feed right there. There's an open bag of feed. And as you can see, we've got quite a few horses in here today. And, well, with an open bag of feed there, it's just a little too much temptation. There's at least one or two that definitely don't need it. One that absolutely should not be having it. So we've got to take that all into account. Anyhow, back to what I was trying to talk about before, was the horse brain, how it works. I discussed that. And their perception of the world, and their perception is not only molded by the way their brain works, but it's also molded by their senses and how their senses work. And their senses are actually quite different than ours too. I mean, they're actually very, very good, but they're very different. And so they don't see, hear, smell, taste things like we do. Considering some of the things that they eat, they definitely don't taste like we do. That stuff's nasty. Anyhow, but this goes along with, a lot of people say, Oh, my horse absolutely hates the wind. Well, you know what? That's actually fairly natural. That is pretty natural. Most horses do not like the wind, and there's a reason for that, because the wind just messes with all of their senses, and they are dependent on those senses for their survival instincts, which I've told you before. The survival instincts in a horse, hardwired, man. They're really solid, and they're very dependent on them. And when it's windy out, that messes with all of the senses that allow the instincts, survival instincts, to work, which makes them very uncomfortable. And that's why the horses get real worried and spooky and agitated and all kinds of stuff when it gets windy out. I'll explain why that is. You see, the way the horse's senses work is, well, first off, let's start with the eyesight compared to ours. We have binocular eyesight. Theirs is monocular, although they do have a small portion in front of them where it is binocular. They can see with both eyes. Normally, they're seeing things with one eye, which really limits depth perception, so that creates a bit of a problem, actually. But the cool thing about their horse's eyes is where ours are designed more for focusing on individual items, theirs are for detecting movement. So if there's a predator, for example, sneaking through the grass a mile away, they'll see it because they can see the grass wiggling. And their eyes are designed to detect movement. And I can, speaking from experience, I was out in the pasture one day, not here at another place, and all of a sudden all the horses' heads popped up and they're all looking the same direction. I'm like, what is over there that's got their interest? And I'm looking and looking and looking and looking, trying to see what they see. And finally, I detected about 2 miles away a deer. And they saw it because their eyes, and they didn't have any trouble seeing it either because their eyes are designed for that. That deer moved, they saw it. Okay, so now the way their hearing works, well, hearing is extraordinary. Their hearing, and that's why they actually make earplugs for horses. For those of you that don't do, if you do mounted shooting, loud things like that, probably a good idea. They actually look kind of like a furry golf ball, about that size, and you actually you stick them right in the ear, and they just block the ear opening. And but their hearing is very, very sensitive. Their sense of smell also very, very good. It has been reported that they have a sense of smell that is equal to that of a bloodhound. For those of you that are familiar with the prowess of tracking dogs and how good they are, well, horses are just as capable. And hey, buddy. But what happens though with all these things going on? They got this marvelous sense of smell, great hearing, great eyesight. But with all these good senses that they have, if it gets windy out, none of them work very well. Their eyesight, for example, which detects movement, when it's windy, pretty much everything's moving. So that doesn't work very well for them when it comes to detecting movement. Because, like I said, the predator off in the grass, well, you're not going to spot him because the grass is, the whole field is moving. It's all waving back and forth in the wind. The bushes and the trees, the branches are all swaying around. Absolutely everything moves in the wind. Well, just about everything. Suppose a big rock wouldn't move much. Depends how strong the wind is. Anyhow, so that's the first one is their eyesight in the wind messes with them. And then, of course, there's their sense of smell. If it's windy, the scent gets blown away. And they're very dependent on their smell to be able to smell. They're, like I said, as good as a bloodhound. So if they got a predator coming up on them, they smell it coming long before they'll hear it or see it because their sense of smell is that good. But then again, that depends. If it's windy, that scent's going to get blown away, and all of a sudden, they now have no sense of smell that they can rely on. Now they're starting to fear for their life because, predator might get them. And that's one of these things. And that's why horses get so upset in the wind, and we haven't even got to the last one, the hearing. Their hearing is very, very good. Works extremely well, but in the wind, everything's rustling and rattling and crackling, and Well, even as a human, you know that when the wind's blowing in your ears, you have trouble hearing. So, I mean, just imagine them big things they got sticking up on top of their heads catching wind. I'm going to bet that that would affect their hearing quite a bit. And on top of that, everything's making noise in the wind, pretty much everything. And so, again, they can't hear. So they can't see well, they can't hear well, they can't smell well. Basically, their life is in danger when it's a windy day. That's the way they think of it. Like I said, the instincts don't go away. The instincts are hardwired into them. They're always going to have them. And, if it's windy out, it's no surprise your horse is not going to be too comfortable. But that's where it's really important that you have a good relationship with the horse so it trusts you even when it's windy. It goes, that's okay, I'm with them. I'm with mom, dad, whoever. They're going to keep me safe. I don't have to worry. I don't care if it's windy. We're good. We're with somebody that we can trust that's going to take care of us. And so that's where the relationship is really, really important. And working with them in the wind as much as possible. A lot of people, I don't want to. I was going to work with my horse today, but I don't want to because it's windy, and turns into a freak when it gets windy. And it's like, well, yeah, it does turn into a freak when it gets windy. But you know what? If you don't work with it in the wind, it's always going to turn into a freak when it's windy, because it never gets used to it. Never learns to trust you. That hey, we worked in the wind yesterday. It was okay. Nothing bad happened. Maybe we can do it today. And after today, the next day, and the day after that, next thing you know, the horse is going, so what? It's windy, big deal. Nothing bad happens when it's windy out. And that's one of those things. And around here, the wind can come up pretty quick and suddenly, and it's pretty drastic sometimes, and it's perpetually windy. You get a lot of wind around here. And I don't know why they call Chicago Windy City. I can tell you, they haven't lived in Saskatchewan. But it's one of those things you got to get them used to the wind, But initially, it's not the least bit surprising for them to be not cool with that wind, because it affects every one of their senses, and their survival instincts are reduced. Their ability to protect themselves and stay alive is lessened. And so you will get very uncomfortable horses in the wind. But like I said, if you build your relationship to the point where they trust you, then when it's windy out, it's not going to be a big deal. And the more you work in the wind, better off they are. But keep in mind, though, that because of their senses and the way they work, they're not only extreme, but they're connected to the brain in a way that is designed to keep them alive. On top of that, the way the brain works, well, that's a little different than ours. They don't see things our way, and they don't have the same sense of logic we have. And they're pretty much just hardwired for survival. And so, what we might be able to look at and think of as, well, okay, that's a such and such, so we don't need to worry about it. The horse looks at it, has no idea what it is, can't use its logic to figure out what it could be or what it could be used for. It simply sees a foreign object it does not know and thinks, that thing might kill me. So, just the way the head works, the way all the senses work, very, very different than ours. And so what's going on in that head? Well, like I said, you want to know what's going on there, so do I, but I don't think we ever will know entirely unless one of us becomes a horse. But if we become a horse, we won't be able to talk. So we won't be able to tell the humans what's going on in the head of a horse. Oh well. But you get the idea, and I don't think you're going to find a whole lot more information on that than, because it's just not there. The studies haven't been done any more extensive than that. There's a limited amount of research, and again, unless you're a horse, you don't know what goes on in their brain. So it's just one of those things that, nobody's ever going to know for sure, completely in detail. We got an idea, though. There's a lot of things going on there that we got a pretty good idea what goes on and how it works, but there's still an awful lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense to us humans. And that's another thing that is very important is, don't humanize things, don't put things in human terms, because their head and their senses don't work like that. So, you're going to be so far out to lunch if you go, well, geez, it's cold out today. Well, the horse doesn't think it's cold. And it doesn't have a jacket on. And it's nice. So stuff like that, you think it's cold, the horse does not. So don't go putting a blanket on just because you're cold. That horse isn't cold, Or, and that's just one of many, many examples I could use. There's a lot of other examples that would be possible. I'd take too long to go through a bunch of them, but let's just say their head doesn't work like ours. Do not expect it to. And will we ever understand the horse fully? Yeah, I doubt it. But hopefully I got you on the track, is that because it is different than us, it gives you an idea what to expect from them. And why does the wind bother them so much? Well, it's because of the way the brain works and the way their senses work. All horses are very, very hardwired for survival. The instinct to survive and stay alive, it's just something that's wired right into them. And you probably never ever get rid of that. So when your horse gets a little weird on windy days, that's why. It's because of its instincts, its senses, and its desire to stay alive. And well, that's also, because of how the brain works, is also contributes to that too. So anyhow, it's about all we can, without repeating ourselves, more than I already have. I think that's about it. We've put a wrap on things, and it's funny, that horse isn't even mine, and she's the one that wants to be with me the most. That's interesting. Anyhow, have a good day. Go play with your horse. Bye.